Moving on to the next metric that we've got here, and it's goal creating actions. And I'll start off again by this one by emphasizing what goal creating actions is defined as by fbref.com. And they are the two offensive actions directly leading to a goal, such as passes, dribbles, and drawing fouls. So essentially, the two offensive actions, meaning, as it lists there, a player who registers the assist, provides that pass, that would be a goal creating action. And if that player had received the ball from another player, the pre-assist, that would also go down as a goal creating action for those two players. Or if a player will dribble and then makes a pass, very much like Adama Traore does, then that will count as two goal creating actions for that individual player if the person on the end of the pass scores a goal. But the player that we've got in this metric that we've picked out, Steve, is Mikkel Damsgaard, who is averaging 0.64 goal creating actions per 90 for Sampdoria, who are 10th in the Serie A table. But Damsgaard's goal creating actions per 90 is just outside the top 10 across Serie A. I think he's around 15th. But the reason that we've picked him out is because he's 20 years old and doesn't regularly get full 90s. He's made 14 starts this season in Serie A, but he's also come on in 13 games. So it's quite a split there under Claudio Ranieri. Steve, is there an area of Mikkel Damsgaard's game that we like? Because obviously these are standout stats. That's the nature of this podcast. That's why we're discussing him. Is there something from a stylistic and optics viewpoint that you perhaps like about his game?
Well, yeah, I think you've got in the notes here that of his 10 goal creating actions, 3 of them are off the dribble, which I think is it wouldn't surprise me if that's quite a high percentage. And yeah, I think he's a real moments player. I haven't watched a huge amount of him, but from what I have seen, he will just do something really amazing in a quick burst, and you just think, wow, this guy, his potential is just like off the charts. If he could do that pretty regularly, then he'd be an absolutely mega player. But I think you really need to take into account that he's kind of just arrived in Serie A. He's 20 years old. He's come from Nordsjælland in Denmark. The step up in quality is massive. We've seen Hauge at Milan this year hardly play after he came from Norway. It's a from the Scandinavian leagues to Serie A, it's a big jump. So I think playing 1,400 minutes, I think that's just a bit around half of the available minutes is a really, really good return, to be honest. Adapting to Serie A, especially in Ranieri's system that he's playing that 4-4-2. That he kind of similar to Leicester days, where he's trying to sit back and hit on the break, and and he's relying on Damsgaard to do a lot of defensive work as well in that. So and he's been pretty reliable defensively as well, to go with his bursts of really good actions going forward. So I think you've got to take some positives out of your first season in Serie A as a 20-year-old and putting up some pretty good numbers and being a pretty good contributor on a mid-table team. So
Yeah, I think that's the crux of the issue, is that he's been a pretty decent contributor to a mid-table side who haven't really it's at no point have they really been threatened by relegation. They haven't, and they won't be threatening the European places. It's very much it's just a functional team, as you say. They're set up well under Ranieri. And the thing that I like about Damsgaard is that he just looks like whenever you watch him, he just looks like a very, very hard-working player. He will run and run and run, and that's across numerous positions. He's played right wing, he's played left wing, which is predominantly where he features for Samp. He's played as an attacking midfielder, as sort of more centrally as a shadow striker across those 27 games this season. But the reason that I picked him out, or rather that his name, probably unconsciously that his name stood out, was because during the last international break, in a 90-minute performance for Denmark, he scored twice and he got 2 assists in the same game against Moldova. In that, I think it was an 8-0 win Denmark registered there. And I think, that's probably why he stuck out a little bit. There were other under 23 players who were in and around the top 20, 25 players for goal creating actions per 90. But Damsgaard stood out because I'd seen him recently and I thought, well, yeah, he's a player that I quite like. And just touching on that defensive output that you mentioned, Steve, that's quite an important point, I think, when it comes to Damsgaard, because, in terms of successful pressures, he is in Serie A the player with the most attempted and the most successful pressures, aged 21 or under in Serie A this season, with 452. Now, to anybody who's not sort of diligently recording Serie A pressures every single game week, 452 means absolutely nothing. So in terms of posturing that against players that we know are really hardworking, really big pressers, Patrick Bamford for Leeds United this season in the Premier League, I think people have sort of cottoned on to how demanding his role is. He's made 459 pressures this season, and Watkins has made 455. So you factor in that those two players for Leeds and Aston Villa have started a lot more. They've played a lot more football this season, and Damsgaard's very much up there with them. That paints a picture of a player who is just giving absolutely no peace to the players on that side of the pitch. And I just quite like that. I like the fact that he's in a new environment in Serie A. It's obviously a massive step up, and he's doing his best to show his worth. And yeah, I'm always going to be sort of drawn to players like that who are I mean, as we've discussed with the goal creating actions, are producing decent levels of output, but are also putting in the hard yards to actually get there. So yeah, he's a player that I very much like.
Kind of a little bit of the Chiesa about him, that energy player that then can go forward and be pretty damaging as well.
Yeah, an energy man. I quite like that term. I have nicked it off somebody on Twitter. I can't remember who it is, and I have said that recently. But yeah, an energy man, I think is a good way of describing him.